Hey folks, Jordan with the Young Turks and TYT Politics. Hope you had a good weekend. I am back in New York after covering the Women's March down in Washington, D.C. You could check out our videos from the Women's March at youtube.com/TYT Politics. We've been putting them up this morning, fast and furious. It was a really great experience. I'll probably do a separate video on that. I wanted to get right to something that President Trump has already done. Today is the first order of business for Trump as president, but he actually did something on Friday when he was inaugurated that I found interesting. It was more symbolic than anything, but it does have ramifications for the eventual repeal of Obamacare, and of course, it paves the way for his huge tax cuts for the wealthy people. Obviously, Trump, in my opinion, was able to con millions of Americans into thinking that he's actually for the working person and working class people. No such thing, which I've reported. So on Friday, Trump issued an executive order which directed the Health and Human Services Secretary and the heads of other agencies to minimize the financial burden of Obamacare on Americans, states, insurers, healthcare providers, and others to the maximum extent permitted by law. Therein lies one of the main hurdles to quickly taking down the Affordable Care Act. Much of Obamacare is controlled by law or by a hefty slew of regulations that an executive order can't undo with the stroke of a pen. This CNN article continues. What the Trump administration can do is tinker with the guidance that enables agencies, states, insurers, and others to actually implement Obamacare. Also, the health secretary can be more liberal with his use of waivers in order to loosen some provisions or allow states to tailor their implementation of certain aspects of the law, particularly Medicaid expansion. Quote, it's a mix of symbolic arm waving and directional guidance to empower Trump administration officials to lean against more regulation on the margin, said Tom Miller, resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. What remains unclear is how far they can go before they bump up against clearer statutory requirements and existing financial regulations. In English, what this means, Trump basically is allowing different agencies and the states to tinker around the edges with Obamacare, implement certain things or choose not to implement certain things, and basically poke at the actual mechanisms of Obamacare before full repeal. So that was what happened Friday. But what's coming out now is that in addition to trying to repeal Obamacare, when Obamacare's repeal goes through by Trump, guess who's going to get substantial tax cuts from President Trump, who fought for the middle class American, who fought for the forgotten man and women. He said on his election night, who fought for the working class or the working poor. I told you, even though I'm very critical of the corporate Democrats and the Democratic establishment, I told you all along this election, Trump is no populist. He is conning Americans into thinking that he is actually going to bring back jobs and that he is going to even the playing field for for middle class and working people. All you had to do was actually read his tax plan and you would know, not happening. His tax plan is George W. Bush's tax plan on steroids. So basically his tone and his rhetoric that he's going to bring back jobs and help the average Joe does not align with his actual policies and his tax plan. And I'm going to read you another article that explains why wealthy people, once Obamacare is repealed, are going to get even more tax breaks. And I know the Trump trolls are already coming for me and saying, oh, Jordan, give the man a chance. You're just a hater. Well, I read the tax plan, unfortunately. I've read a lot of his policies, and they all strike the same exact tone. That is, tax cuts for wealthy people, subsidies for oil companies, subsidies for big banks, subsidies for all the people who he said he's going to fight against. Sounds a little bit like Hillary Clinton to me. Now, here's an article from the Washington Post. It was written by Jared Bernstein, who does a lot with tax policy and the Center for Budget, the Center on Budget Office. The election of Donald Trump with a Republican majority in Congress is proving once again that conservative economic policy largely reduces to cutting taxes, mostly for the rich. But wait a second, aren't they also wading into healthcare reform? They are, and it proves my point. While much attention is reasonably focused on how they're all repeal with no replace, he's talking about Obamacare, and how that's likely to reverse the coverage gains we've seen and undermine insurance markets, there's something else going on here. And that is, you guessed it, a big tax cut for the rich. Wait a minute, Donald Trump's cutting taxes for the rich? Don't you say? Unless your job description includes denying the facts around the Affordable Care Act, you probably know that it has provided health insurance coverage to 20 million people, lowering the uninsured rate to an all-time low of 9.1% from 16% before the reform was enacted. What you might not know is that most of the revenue the ACA raised flows from some very rich waters. Before I continue reading, let me make something clear. I'm not in love with Obamacare. I don't think it's the ideal healthcare system. I think it was a huge, wet kiss to insurance companies. Do I think it's better than the previous healthcare system, which was basically you're shit out of luck if you have a pre-existing condition? Basically is if you're uninsured and go to an emergency room, we as taxpayers pay for your bill. I do think Obamacare is better than that. I think that single payer is the way to go. I've made that clear in my reporting. Bernie Sanders obviously feels that way, and progressives would like to see a single payer system. But in terms of ripping insurance from 20 million people, which are mostly low income, a lot of minority people, do I think ripping that away is a good idea with no real repeal plan in place? And the repeal plan that they're being talked about is essentially, Paul Ryan's plan, which is block granting Medicaid to the states. No, that's not a good idea. That's not going to help working class people, and that's not going to help people that for the first time were able to get health insurance. But let me read on so you know what this is really about, which as always is about giving tax breaks to the rich. So now consider the implication of these facts in the context of repeal and fail to replace. There's been useful reporting on the tens of millions of people expected to lose coverage, but the other side of that equation is a big tax cut for the wealthiest Americans. In other words, the latest payback for some of the working class voters who helped elect President Trump is to take away their health care and give the savings to millionaires and billionaires. Just how fat a tax cut? The question is answered in a new report by 3 of my colleagues at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Using IRS data, they show that the 400 richest Americans, whose average annual income is more than $300 million, would each get an average $7 million kickback from ending 2 Affordable Care Act taxes. One is the 0.9% hospital insurance tax and the 3.8% unearned income Medicare tax. The base for both taxes are individuals with income above $200,000 and couples with incomes above $250,000, making this a highly progressive revenue source. This also means that the 160 million households with incomes below these levels get no tax benefits from repealing those taxes. What does that mean in English? Essentially, Trump, through repealing the Affordable Care Act, is also repealing taxes that were levied against individuals making above $200,000 and couples making more than $250,000 a year. And I could tell you, because I went around the country to probably between 20 and 30 Trump rallies on the campaign trail, majority of people at his rallies were not individuals making $200,000 a year or couples making $250,000 a year. They were making way less. So when he repeals Obamacare, this article rightly shows that through the, let me say it again, the hospital insurance tax and the unearned income Medicare tax, when those taxes are repealed, then the people making above $200,000 and couples making above $250,000 are getting a huge tax cut. This would give, according to IRS data, the 400 richest Americans whose average annual income is more than $300 million would each get an average $7 million kickback. You think you're in that category of the $7 million kickback? That's a huge tax cut. Indeed, as this is Jared Bernstein writing. Indeed, as my colleague points out, ACA repeal would significantly raise taxes on about 7 million low and moderate income families due to the loss of their premium tax credits, worth an average of $4,800 in 2017. That helped them buy health coverage through the health insurance marketplaces and afford to go to the doctor when needed. In fact, as the chart below reveals, the repeal leads to the richest 400 households getting a $2.8 billion tax break. That's bigger than the value of almost 670,000 ACA tax credits, worth $2.5 billion, going to people in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. So I want to provide context. Again, I am not in love with the Affordable Care Act at all. If it were up to me, we would have pushed forward single payer. But I don't think repealing it without a better replacement is the way to go. But devil's advocate, I'm talking about that people making less than $200,000 a year and couples making less than $250,000 a year are not going to get a tax cut as a result of the repeal of Obamacare. But people making up above those max are. Devil's advocate, deductibles went way up for many, many Americans under Obamacare. So if Trump's plan and the Republican Congress's plan lowers deductibles, which, let's be real, I don't think it's going to, because they haven't put forward a plan. They pounded their chests for the last 8 years. We got to repeal Obamacare. We got to repeal Obamacare. They've voted 50 times to repeal Obamacare, yet never found time to actually come up with a plan. Sounds pretty Republican to me. So if their plan lowers deductibles and lowers costs, you could say, well, that is a tax cut for Americans. I would agree with that. If they are able to provide health insurance with lower deductibles, with lower costs overall, then maybe you could look at the tax that as a tax cut for most Americans. However, they don't have a repeal. They don't have a replacement plan. They are radically going to take 20 million people off their health insurance without a replacement plan. The only thing Donald Trump has said about the specifics of his replacement plan is people are going to be beautifully covered. Beautifully covered. So if Donald Trump came forward today with specifics that showed deductibles going down for people, that showed costs going down for people, I would credit the man. I don't have Trump derangement syndrome like the rest of the media, okay? If he does something good, I'm going to say, good job, Trump. Doesn't mean you're not a racist. Doesn't mean you're not a fascist. But occasionally we could say he's doing good things economically. Perfect example, he has signed two executive orders today. One is to stop the TPP officially, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The other one is to start the process of renegotiating NAFTA, which has been a disaster. Bernie Sanders talked about NAFTA at length and the TPP, and Bernie Sanders supporters and Donald Trump supporters had that in common. They both did not want the TPP, and they both want NAFTA renegotiated. As we know, these free trade deals have decimated the Midwest and the states that frankly just put Donald Trump in the White House. So give credit where credit is due. In stopping the TPP, and according to him, he's going to renegotiate NAFTA. That's a good thing. However, when Donald Trump went around the country with this populist rhetoric, which was BS, and I knew it was BS, and I told you it was BS at the time, where he's saying, I'm going to bring back jobs for the middle class and America first, and enough with these hedge fund managers getting all the breaks. Well, his policies are helping the same people he was saying he's going to take it to. And by the way, that makes him not very different from Hillary Clinton. And let's not let the Democrats off the hook, because the Democrats do the same exact things. They talk about, they give you platitudes about they're the party of the working people and they're going to help the working people. And then they vote to deregulate Wall Street. Then they vote, for modest tax hikes on the wealthy, but they don't do a damn thing to hold the wealthy accountable and actually increase taxes on the wealthy and make the wealthy pay what they should be paying, which is a lot more than they're paying right now. So why I'm bringing this to you, and I will put the article that I read from under the video after I'm done live so you could read it. Facts are facts. Numbers are numbers. Written policies are written policies. I went at it with Trump supporters on the road for a year because they don't want to actually acknowledge reality. I read his tax plan. And I'm reading up on who is going to get huge tax cuts from repealing Obamacare. It's not the middle class people Trump has promised to fight for. It's not the middle class people, or formerly middle class people, who just elected him president. It's wealthy people. It's the hedge fund managers. It's the Wall Street banks. It's the oil companies. It's the pharmaceutical companies. Cenk has said it best. He said he was going to drain the swamp. No, no, no. He is the swamp. Let's see who he just put around himself. The CEO of ExxonMobil, for God's sakes. The CEO of ExxonMobil, an EPA administrator who doesn't believe in climate change. I mean, whether we think the corporate Democrats are bad too, which I do, and I'm going to do a video on the Young Turks YouTube today on Cory Booker and the corporate Democrats who skipped the Women's March in order to go to a nice little high-priced donor retreat this weekend. The DNC chair candidates couldn't be bothered to go march with the women because they were behind closed doors at a donor retreat. Yeah, they've learned a lot from Hillary Clinton's defeat. Unbelievable. But why I'm doing this? You got to know, Trump could say whatever he wants, but we cannot just blindly say, oh, we're not going to only focus on corporate Democrats. Got to hold Trump accountable too. He's conned his voters. His policies are socialism for the rich. They're no different than George W. Bush. They're no different than Ronald Reagan. He is for trickle-down economics. He is for tax breaks for the rich, thinking that that trickles down to the rest of us. No, 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 no. That causes crumbs. The crumbs trickle down while the rich get richer. Just look at the chart. 1981 to present day. Income inequality has exploded in this country, and it's because of policies like this. Tax breaks for the rich. So I'm going to call Trump out when I have to call Trump out. I'm not going to cover 24/7 his tweets. I don't have an interest in doing that. Let CNN and the rest of the Trump derangement industry do that. I don't care what Donald Trump tweets most of the time. But on policy, Obamacare repeal, they are giving huge tax breaks to wealthy people, and he's trying to con his voters into thinking it's going to help them. Like I said, I'm going to do another video on TYT YouTube probably within the next hour on Cory Booker. He, as usual, was a hypocrite at the Women's March, as well as the DNC chair candidates going to a high-dollar donor retreat this weekend instead of marching with the women. Thanks for watching, guys. And as always, you can check out other videos from me at youtube.com/TYTpolitics. Thanks.